Hi guys, it's so great to see you all. It's amazing that it's really a live event. And I cannot imagine a better beginning of the day to start with our first long-awaited unicorn. We really kept those fingers crossed for them, and they finally did it. So yes, we have our first unicorn in Latvia, and this is Printful. And Dāvis Siksnāns is the CEO and co-founder of the company. So I will start with the simple question for those who doesn't know what Printful does. So can you explain a bit? What's your business?
Yeah, so I try to explain really simply. We say we print T-shirts and other print products for online stores, but a more technical term, we're a print-on-demand company for e-commerce businesses, brands, creators, influencers, etc., who don't want to invest in the fulfillment themselves, but would like to sell products sustainably on demand globally, and we enable that for them, on whatever platform they do it, Shopify, Etsy, eBay, Amazon, etc.
Okay, I know that most of you doesn't want to go back to the memories of pandemic, but let's go a bit back because I think there are a lot of good lessons that we can learn from that. And Dāvis, do you remember what you thought when you realized that the world will stop for a while?
It was a crisis. For a moment, it's unknown. Like, we were a company just going one direction, and suddenly sort of the world stopped and nobody knew what's going to happen. But, I was lucky to have a resilient team on my side. So I was happy that we invested in the team prior to pandemic. So they are, can be by my side as a CEO and co-founder through unknown what's going to happen. So the first few weeks was like everybody was in shock. Like, there was a demand shock for all the companies. But later on, we were in sort of a mode how to, actually maybe use the pandemic in a way that takes us to next level, which was the case for all e-commerce companies, really.
So we are reading in different books that we should perceive crises as challenges. Did you thought of it as a crisis, or was it challenge and you thought, hey, we should come up with something interesting and use this?
Well, I think when we started, I actually reminded the team and that the translation of the Chinese word for crisis, the symbol means danger. Yes, be aware of all the things that's happening, but also opportunity. So, and definitely was a huge opportunity. I think the e-commerce businesses in the last 2 years were pulled forward maybe 2 years. Normally it would have taken maybe 5 years to us get here, but because of the pandemic and people shopping online increasingly a lot more than they did before, it helped us. And especially in Europe, like our business is primarily United States, which was a huge effect, but in Europe, especially Southern Europe, where we have a facility in Spain, it probably would have taken them 10 years to get with an e-commerce development that we're currently at.
What was the core team that made those decisions? Who were your right hands in this process?
Well, we have the whole executive team, is all the managers. So right now our executive team that reports directly to me is about 13 people. So all the heads of departments, and we just kind of switched from in-person to Zoom. Actually, 2 weeks prior to pandemic, we were sort of testing how we can go full remote, and initially there were challenges with VPNs for everybody, but we were always kind of remote because Printful never was just in Latvia. We always had several facilities in the United States, so we had team members from Los Angeles and Charlotte calling in for several years before that. So anyway, when the pandemic started, we just upped the frequency of those calls. There were daily calls about whatever going on in the business. And what's also very important for us, it was not just, okay, let's move everybody offline, off-site to remote to their homes. For us, we had facilities to keep going. So we had like a legal team who monitored all the countries that Printful operated in and their local legislations. Like in the United States, there were waves like California passes this, Los Angeles passes this, and we were in North Carolina. There were differences, what the Charlotte City said, what the Mecklenburg County said, what the North Carolina said, and whatever the Trump said at the time.
Okay. And when you look back at this time, do you have some learnings. What have been done differently, better?
Well, if I had to do it over again, we didn't really plan for such a thorough crisis workshops. For instance, our partner Zendesk, which we use for customer service, they actually had gone through workshops of pandemic specifically. So they were, a bit more prepared. So we had to kind of learn on the go. So right now, we probably as a company just going to go through workshops, and we have, people who look at various crises and try to sort of role play how it's going on. So that's useful, something you can do in your business. But otherwise, yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's communication. So not just those executive meetings were happening every week, but also like messaging these memos to the whole company, or on the Slack channel, or via email. And then you have to sort of reiterate that with the team members in all the countries that we operated, and also fulfillment centers, right? We had 1,000 people working in 15 fulfillment centers, right? So there was a team leaders and shift leaders who had to reiterate the message.
Okay. And some companies already came back at the full speed working in the offices. What is your cultural patterns you created during pandemic, and you will keep going with that? Does it remote work or?
Yeah, so after the first year, we were mostly in office, and after the first year, my initial thought and our initial thought was that, pandemic ends in 1 year, we'll be all in office. And for a while, it was kind of looking like that last summer. But right now, we fully embrace the hybrid work. We believe that 2 years was the time that, the world is permanently changed. And we are now in a hybrid mode. So, people can reserve their desks, and, we have executives who, are not always on the site, as well as people can work from abroad for 90 days. I myself also worked from abroad, several times last year during the lockdowns. So all these things are just, we thought this was a thing that's going to pass. We are sort of embracing that as a norm for Printful. But we're keeping the offices. We have several offices. We have a new office building here in the Riga city center, and it's kind of 60% full right now, and I expect it to be fuller, but it's going to be hybrid, so a lot of people will work some days from home.
How the e-commerce changed during pandemic? Well,
yeah, as I said, pull forward, so massive pull forward globally. Again, a little bit different from the countries, huge benefit from that, and also why it's important for startups from this region try to grow global. I was just thinking about this before. It really helped us that we're in the United States, and when the pandemic started, all the countries were willing to spend massive amounts of money to support the economies. For instance, every time the United States had a stimulus check, the last stimulus check was actually last March, just massive order income was growing at our businesses. So you benefit from a large country that is willing to spend tons of money. And for instance, United States can borrow at really cheap rates. The case is, for instance, being in Latvia or Baltic, a smaller country, the government spending is not as massive. So you wouldn't benefit from that as much. So it's really important to be a big market like the United States.
Mm-hmm. And did pandemic help you to reach this unicorn status to raise money for your newest round?
Yeah, it was actually our first round because the founders of Printful had other businesses, so with our own money up in the first 8 years. So our first round was at year 8. We had approached by investors before, but since we're a new industry, print on demand, a lot of them didn't understand it, and we felt like the deal we would reach before that wouldn't be fair to us. And even in 2020, we were conscious about all these investors coming to our way. We were growing really rapidly, and we said, I wanted to wait for the full year, because at least in my opinion, investors really appreciate a full year's data, an audited data, and then they make a multiple calculation based on that. So we sort of initially worked with the investment bankers at end of 2020, and it took about 6 years to complete the deal, which we announced actually a year ago. But I wanted full 2020 data and give that to investors, and because it was sort of our goal. We felt like we were appropriate for a unicorn status, but to get there, I had to wait a couple months more. Like if you were raised in 2020, mid-2020, I don't think we would be there. But since we waited, we were lucky to land that $1 billion plus valuation.
Mm-hmm. Does bringing on the investors change something in the strategy of the company?
Well, it's another party that's looking at everything what your business does. Before that, our board was only internal executives. So me, the other co-founder, and our chief operations officer. So 3 people, board members, right? So right now we have a board, and we have these things called board meetings, which I'm still getting used to. So one is coming up in 2 weeks, and so they have to, do a little more reporting, and they, help us with their knowledge, which is in our case is, financing and, scaling up the sales team and things like that. Okay.
The title of this discussion is from CEO to a leader, and there are different opinions. Is CEO the same as the leader, or leader is something bigger? What are your thoughts?
Well, I haven't thought of them as separate. The CEO should be both, a CEO and a good executive and a leader. But I think if you're a good leader and CEO, it shows that sort of through your team. And again, that was, I think, a good leader when invested in a good team that can sort of replace you. You can go on vacations if necessary. So you don't want to sort of tie it all up to you, that all the decisions have to go through you. You have to really empower the team.
Okay. And what are leaders that inspires you?
I'm inspired by leaders and business models. In our case, I think, what really is inspiring for us is Amazon and Bezos. So like an executive team, we went through the 2 books that Brad Stone wrote about Amazon. The recent Amazon Unbound was actually like a case study that we did in our management offsite in January. So because the way Amazon does things in their business model is inspiring for us as well. The way that, they started was, selling books online and now moved in Amazon web services and many other things. And that's something that we also aspire to Printful, even though we're sort of established as printing t-shirts in US. Now we do a lot of other products. We have warehousing and fulfillment. We're moving more into software, as well as started 3 other startups as an ecosystem from Printful Bits, from internal tools that we did. Same as Amazon's case, the Amazon Web Services was initially built for Amazon.com because they were scaling so rapidly, and then they decided to externalize it. So that aspect, we hope to sort of recreate in Printful as we externalize certain tools that we use internally.
So you are looking around and adapting some strategies of other companies, or you are focused more on your own path?
Well, you have to have your own unique strategy for your own specific case. There's things that, of course, we're inspired by what other companies do. For instance, vertical integrations. In our space, in print-on-demand merchandise, Fanatics is one of the biggest companies out there. I think their recent raise was $30 to $40 billion. So they're a vertically integrated company that does both the e-commerce part of it for the NHLs, NBAs, and as well as the production part of it. So that strategy inspired us, so we're trying to replicate in Printful, as well as another company great in our space is Lululemon, the athletic wear company, and the way they invest in great technical apparels also sort of, a great book about as well we read internally for our teams from the founder of Lululemon.
Mm-hmm. What are your biggest challenges as a CEO right now?
Well, they continue to sort of, be the same, build out the team and look for strategy. Right now, it's, we're sort of exiting the pandemic as we see it here, so we have to now travel the world. I think the last 2 years, we sort of were very reliant on the contacts that we actually built before the pandemic. Now, we're sending team members go back to abroad and to build those contacts and business deals. Like, for instance, during the pandemic, we set up locations in Canada, without physically going there. There were like a couple people that went there and stayed for 2 weeks in isolation in a hotel, which I'm going to be forever grateful for, the team members that did that. And then we sort of remotely set up partnerships in Australia and Japan. So right now, finally, Japan is open, and we're excited to send team members to meet, our Japanese partners, for instance.
You are mentioning team all the time, and I believe here are many young entrepreneurs. What advice can you give to them when they are building their teams?
Well, these events like these are great for context, so stay on top of that. So network, somebody you might be relevant later down the road, and be prepared that it might take a long time. In our case, Printful only raised the first raise in 8 years, so you can't build a unicorn really overnight, and it will take a long time, and build your contacts team, and attend events, preferably in person, because we believe that in person the contacts you're going to make is going to be much stronger and better. So the case, for instance, is the raising as well. We use the Rothschild Investment Bank to assist to meet the investors. We met with them 2 times prior in New York, and they had met all the investors. So that all these in person before. So all these connections that was made in person really ultimately helped in landing the deal, etc.
So in-person meetings, are they the most important? Or we can do everything in Zoom and...
You can do mostly in Zoom, but on one part of you have to meet. So for instance, investor that invested in Printful, we had to actually get them allowance to get into Latvia last year, so he actually came and visited physically, as well as the United States, his representatives visited. So that's why, for instance, we see also in Japan, meeting is necessary, but we struggle really doing that over the Zoom. And the way the organizations are built there, the way the management styles, like I have to go to Japan at some point because they look, hey, the CEO needs to speak to another CEO and stuff like that.
If you talk about entrepreneurial skills, do you think it's a talent, or the person can learn something by doing?
Well, it's a lot of you can learn by doing. I mean, one of the most important things for us internally, even in CEO or not an executive, is just somebody who loves to read and learn new things. Somebody who doesn't want to stop at reading and stuff. We really share a lot of articles, books, and I wouldn't want to have anybody on my direct team that just doesn't love reading and learning things. So that's one of the key skill needs to be there, and if you have that, then you can learn about the certain things that you do not understand as CEO. So I now read a lot about legal system in US and financial stuff, and because I love just to learn new things.
One part of the entrepreneurial journey is failures. Do you tolerate failures in your team? How do you deal with them?
Yeah, experiments is one of our things that are core to our culture. Printful was once just an experiment that we tried one of our businesses, and a lot of business didn't work, right? So the founders of Printful had started 100 businesses over a course of, which is now 18 years. So about maybe 10 remain, and Printful is just one of them. It takes a lot of tries and fails and mistakes to get to the thing that works out.
What's the best way to overcome these failures? Do you have some advice?
Well, admit mistakes is, I think, something important as well. It's very difficult sometimes to work with a team member that made a mistake and is trying to sort of brush it under the table, doesn't acknowledge it. It also breaks the trust among team members. So the first step to overcome the mistakes is admit it and ask for help.
Okay. And the last question, I know people in the audience want me to ask you, I know someone, when can we join this Printful with our investments? When can we expect IPO? The closest the IPO will be, if it's going to be, we'll talk less and less about it. But right now probably is not a good time to consider public listing. Right? In the last 3 months, there was very few of those, and probably the last year that Vinny raised was the best year to raise money of all time. There was not a better time to raise money at all. So we're taking a long-term perspective. So I don't know when, there's no specific timing, but as any company, we're constantly evaluating the best opportunities, be that another investment round with somebody, be that going public or something else. Okay, and what are your goals for the nearest future? Let's say, 2, 3, 5 years?
We'll continue to grow and develop, adapt to new realities of post-COVID. Right now, we're seeing the advertising costs have gone up, so the new startups starting out will have a sort of a more difficult time to reach audiences just using Instagram and Facebook advertising. So for us, for instance, we're moving into enterprise market more heavily, more established companies, these large companies that sign a longer term contracts and have established audiences and customers. So that's sort of a near term for us to grow in maybe different segments and geographies. So in the last year, we scaled up massively. So our production capacity can support more than $400 million of top line revenue. Now we sort of, our sales and marketing teams are working to attract the customers that fill our capacity.
I wish you best of luck to reach your goals. And to all of you, I wish you amazing and inspirational TechChill this year. Thank you.
Thank you.